When you start to progress in your remote control hobby, one of the things you'll find necessary is to invest in a radio, a good quality computerized radio. This is my Spectrum DX7. I actually bought this in January 2008, so I've been using it pretty much solid for 7 years and it's been fantastic. I actually spent about £260 back in January 2008, and at that point I had one model that I was going to fly it with, and I was in the middle of building my first T-Rex 450, so £250 seemed like a hell of an investment. But I knew at that point that I'd been bitten by the bug, and this was a hobby that I was going to stick with for a while. So on the advice of some very smart people on the forums, I actually plumped and got the radio that at the time was getting all the rave reviews, and would also allow me to use things like bind and fly models. Now, what I want to do is just go through some of the considerations, because there's a lot of subscribers are building their own models and doing bits and pieces at the moment, and I wanted to talk about the considerations when you're looking at buying a computerized radio and what you really need to think about if you're considering you're treating yourself for Christmas. The first thing obviously to consider is cost. These things are expensive, but if you're doing it right, you'll use these things for probably 5 to 10 years easily, and you'll find that when you break it down a cost per year, so basically this thing's cost me about £35 a year over the lifetime that I've had it, and I expect to keep on using it for another 3 or 4 years, because I'll be using this for quite a few of my models that don't need setting up on the new radio I've got. But it's also going to be helpful to have this as a nice trainer radio when I'm buddy box flying and teaching people to fly their models. Second thing I'd always look at is look at the online reviews. Not all radios are perfect. They all have their own idiosyncrasies. Some of them are better than others. Have a look online, see what people are saying, see where the weaknesses are, and don't just go on what the website says. If a deal looks too good to be true, it probably is. And that all revolves around ease of use. How easy is the menu to set up? Do you think that that's something that you're going to be able to cope with? Are there videos online, instructional bits and pieces, places you can go for help if you haven't got a hobby field that you go to, or a couple of pals who have been doing the hobby for longer than you that have an idea of what they're doing? Also think about the number of model memories. Now I think the DX7 has 20. When I bought it, it had 1.5. It had 2 when I built my second model. Now it's probably up to 17, 18 because of all the other bits and pieces that I fly. The planes, the wings, the foamies, the quadcopters, you name it. Everything's gone on here. So what initially looked to me like complete overkill, when you have it for a long time, you will fill that stuff up. So have a think about that. 20 looked too much for me, but actually it's done me great. Look at the number of channels as well. The 4-channel radio obviously has throttle, rudder, elevator and aileron. So they're your basic 4 channels, and then most radios will have at least one more. So something like a DX5 will have another channel that you can use for maybe mode on the APM or something else. Or most commonly, a 6-channel radio is kind of the entry level. Having several channels here has just given me enough to do what I want to do, but there's been a couple of times, like with gimbals, where I could have done with an extra couple of channels just to control what the gimbal was looking at, or to do something like head tracking. Think also about whether or not that you want to do things like bind and fly. Bind and fly technologies from people like Horizon work with Spectrum technology, and also things like the Orange Tech from Hobby King, which uses similar DSM style radio transmissions. Think about those things before, because you don't want to spend your £200, £300 or $300, $400 on a radio and then find that the model that you really wanted to play with isn't going to work with it. Are you going to use the radio with something like a simulator, so like a real flight or a Phoenix RC? I'm a Phoenix RC pilot myself. That was great in the early days, and to be fair, when the weather's horrible in winter, it's still a great way to keep your thumb and muscle memory up for flying. But I found that looking at that, I could figure out that it was one of the models that was supported, so that was fine. Let's talk about where you buy them from. Because this is such an expensive investment, I personally would recommend finding out where your local hobby shop is and going and talking to those guys. Find out where your mates have got theirs from, and find out who the local reputable hobby shop is. I'm sure if you get into the hobby, you've probably found out already. eBay and those kind of places are fantastic for components, but for a big investment like this, where you, if there's any problems or any issues, you don't want to be shipping this back to China, or trying to get support from somebody who supports 5,000 different products, and yours just happens to be one of them and doesn't really know what he's talking about. I would recommend support your local hobby shop. The first DX7, this DX7 that I bought here, was bought from, in the UK, an outfit called heliguy.com. And the one I've just bought, that I'll show you in a second, was bought from Steve Webb Models, which is my local hobby shop in Frodsham in Cheshire. And it's great to be able to go in, because not only will they do deals, but they will offer advice and allow you to hold and use these radios. And that's an important part as well, because unless you've kind of held them and figure out whether or not they fit your fingers, whether or not you can easily get to the controls with your thumbs, it's very difficult to tell whether or not you're going to love the radio and be able to live with it for 5 to 10 years. So another thing to think about here is the different type of radios that's on offer. So just like cars, there are lots of different manufacturers. This happens to be Spectrum, and I'm a Spectrum fan. You know, I've been a Spectrum fan since I got this, and it's worked really well for me. But for some of the people, Spectrum hasn't been a great fit, and they're using Futaba, Taranis, the Orange ORX radios, or whatever. Everybody has their own view about what the best radio system is, based on their own personal experience and what they've read and what they've heard. I personally would say, look at what your friends are flying at the field, what they have experience with. Go to the hobby shop, have a chat with those guys as well, and pick one that feels right for you, that hopefully is a similar system, if not the same system, with your mates that you're already flying. The reason I say that is if you wanted then to use this as a trainer, you can connect it using a cable out the back into your friends, and your friend can help you learn to fly, or vice versa. And it's important that you have something that you do feel comfortable with, that you're not going to get stuck on 2 days after you get it because you can't figure out how to do a flat mix for your Bixler. And then finally, I just want to show you my new toy. And one of the reasons I've made this video is just to show you what I got from Steve Webb this morning. Ta-da! This is my DX9. It was a deal where for the price of the DX9, you also got an AR 8000 as well. There'll be lots of videos coming about this over the next coming months and weeks as I set it up. The reason I got this one is 4 things really. First thing was voice. Second was the ability to do head tracking, extra channels for the gimbal, and finally have telemetry as well. So keep your eyes open for the videos on this over the coming weeks, and hopefully for those of you that are thinking about buying a radio, that will give you some food for thought. And if you have any questions or comments, please pop them below. But like, subscribe, and happy flying.